we go. Good. We are live. Welcome, everyone. My name is Darian. I welcome you to the 17th session of On Data and Design. This time, because of Corona, we are still online, streaming over YouTube. Short introduction of myself. I'm Darian. I'm the co-founder of Superdot. We're in the business of making complex issues understandable. I'm also teaching in different Swiss universities on the topic of data visualization. And the reason you are here is probably because of On Data and Design. And that's an evening meetup series we started 3 years ago. In the beginning, it was a physical meeting happening in Vienna, Basel, and Berlin. And now the idea behind the whole thing is that we want to have inspiring topics, exchange on the topics, and networking on the topic of data and design. And today I'm honored to have here a co-hosted event with Road to Bern, with Benjamin Roten. We have the topic of the Sustainable Development Goals. And actually, Benjamin is co-hosting with me. So actually, I don't have that hard job today to do. So I will immediately lead now to Benjamin. Maybe you can introduce yourself and continue with today's agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Darian. Hello also from my side. As he said, I'm Benjamin. I work for the Swiss Federal Statistical Office and running with my colleagues the Road to Bern. What's the Road to Bern? What's the 2030 agenda? So maybe it's good, Jeff, just to have a short introduction on this topic before we give the floor to our fantastic panelists. So first of all, in September 2015, all world leaders accepted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. That's this one. You may have seen this logo. You can see behind me 17 logos because that's the goals we have, 17. And we have 169 targets. And when we accepted this agenda, we said we have to be accountable. How can we be accountable? For that, we need Stefan. And we can hear Stefan a bit later. We can have Statistics Italy a bit later, how we help to be accountable for countries, for the society. And we knew that the official statistics, they have a good network. They meet often in New York, in Geneva, around the globe. And we know how to use statistics. But we also know today we need also private data producers. And we also want to talk with the data users, of course. So how to do that? So we funded the UN World Data Forum. As you can see, it will be in Bern this October. Let's hope so. And to have this kind of discussion. How can we improve our data collecting? How can we improve also our data visualization? I think this is exactly the reason why we're here. When Switzerland hosted or decided to host the next UN World Data Forum, we said, okay, let's meet in Bern. Let's have fantastic 4 days, but let's also have clear outcomes. Because that's a bit, let's say, the problem of international organizations meeting. We meet and we have fun, but we say, okay, in 2 years, we have to do that. We have to do that. And then we said, okay, let's do it now before. Use the time, the 2 years we have. Let's have this kind of discussions we have today. So that's why we founded the Road to Bern. And we have a lot of different meetings. And this is one, I think it's the 25th meeting we have under the label Road to Bern. We will have one tomorrow as an official side event together with Stefan Schweinfest from the UN Statistics Division. If you want to know more about the Road to Bern, UN World Data Forum and 2030 Agenda, just go on our website, www.roadtobern.ch, or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. So I just stop here speaking because there are much more people sitting on a panel and will give us some inputs how they see how we have to develop what changed in the last year. So our first speaker is, Darian.
One more thing, additional information. So for everyone who is now watching our YouTube live stream, you have the possibility to ask questions. So you will find in YouTube, in the description, there is a link, ask questions during the streaming. That's a link to Slido. So please feel free, address your question to one of the speakers. You can do that with your name or anonymously. No registration needed. We will collect the questions. And then in the end, there will be the discussion round after each of the speakers. So feel free, use that possibility to participate and interact with us. That's it.
Sorry, that's a very crucial input for that. So let's go to Vincent. Vincent is from Denmark, heads the Institute for Bubble Studies, if I say that correctly. And we meet the first time in 2018 at the conference we organized together with an NGO that works in statistics, and we talked about fake news. And now that's the second time we're organizing an event together. And I'm very happy to have him here with us. And I just give you the floor, Vincent.
Well, thank you so much, sir. Let me just share the screen here, and I'll take the floor. Now, yes, my name is Vincent Hendricks. I'm a professor of formal philosophy at the University of Copenhagen and the director of the Center for Information and Bubble Studies. Now, most of what I've been saying today, you don't need to take notes because you can buy the book and the t-shirt and the hula hoop and the yo-yo and all the other items, but you don't have to buy it. The good thing is that most of what we're talking about today is basically a book that came out last year. It's called Reality Lost: Markets of Attention, Misinformation, and Manipulation. It came out with Springer, but it's open access. So it's free of charge. So you can basically just download it for free in a PDF file, going to the link there. I'm sure that the organizers afterwards, if you're interested, could just send you that particular link, or you're welcome to write me and I'll tell you all about it. Now look at this screen here. There's a lot of information on the right-hand side, and there's a picture of a book cover on the other. Now, which one gives more information? Well, probably the one on the left rather than the right, because the one on the right takes a lot of attention. And attention is everything these days. So back in 1971, I was 1 year old.
Sorry, you can do full screen, right? Because we see the PowerPoint interface.
Say again?
Can you press on full screen? Because
it is on full screen.
We see the whole thumbnails.
Okay, they won't. Okay, because I'm running on two screens. See?
Okay.
So it's on one screen and the other, and it can't make a distinction. So
okay.
You'll have to live with this, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
You live with that. Okay.
Good.
So
good.
in the sub screen of the full screen, you will see the slide screen, and you can see, as I was saying, on the left hand side, you have the picture of you have the cover of the book, and on the right hand side, there's a lot of text. Now, which one makes the further impression and which one is fast? Well, you probably the right-hand side. And that's the point. Back in 1971, and I was 1 year old, Herbert Simon, who received the Nobel Prize in 1978, back in 71, said something very prophetically about an information age to come. He said, in an information-rich world, you're going to find a scarcity of something else. There will be a scarcity of whatever it is that information consumes. But what information consumes is pretty obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. And there you have it. In the information age, it's not microchips or oil. It's people's attention as a cognitive resource and as an asset. Because attention generates engagement, and engagement generates traffic. And traffic generates data, and data can be curated, it can be big data analyzed, and then it can be used for sales. That's the market model of most of the social media platforms that we know today. So that basically means as soon and as much you can capture people's attention, and what is being consumed once you are using your attention is basically information. So information is the gateway through your attention to your consciousness. That is basically the cognitive model under which most of these companies operate. But whatever captures our attention doesn't have to be true. So basically, it doesn't make a distinction between whether the information that you acquire that you spend your time on is true or false. Those such distinctions are made. And I'm sorry to say that all the studies that we have been conducting seems to support the idea that whatever is viral is not necessarily true, and whatever is true is not necessarily viral. And thus, it's not for fun that World Economic Forum, since 2013 in their global risk reports, every year, the OECD as well, the UN has also been knocking on this door, basically to say that in misinformation is now to be considered a global challenge on par with climate change, world health issues, the 17 UN goals, if you wish, the World Economic Forum's 10 challenges to the world. Misinformation is one of them. And the argument is that the global risk of massive digital misinformation sits at the center of a constellation of technological and geopolitical risks, ranging from terrorism to cyber attacks and the failure of global governance. The latter part of the sentence, read democracy, if you wish. Now, that's the situation we are in. And it's not too surprising, actually. Our understanding of democracy dates back to the Enlightenment. And the basic idea was back then, as it should be now, give people some more, make more information available, read, knowledge, and giving them more information and knowledge would actually strengthen their autonomy, their self-determination, and the way in which they can make independent, qualitative, correct decisions. That's the entire point of correct information.
Vince,
But what we
sorry,
have seen,
sorry, Vince. I'm a pain in the ass. The question is it still correct that we are on the technical question that we are on the slide 1?
no, we are on slide 2.
Okay, because we just see slide 1. The audience is seeing slide 1.
Well, that is not very helpful now, is it? Okay, so
Yeah,
so
now
what
we
am
saw
I
it.
going to do about that exactly?
Now we saw it for a minute. We saw it in full screen for a second before what you did.
Well, are you seeing a slide where it says World Economic Forum 2013?
Yes, now we see it.
Okay, so
but
that
not
means
in full
once I go full screen, we got a problem.
Okay, good.
All right, so I'm just going to have to go like this. Okay, you can see this.
Yes, we see now World Economic Forum 2013.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
Sorry.
I'm sorry about this glitch. These things happen. Okay, so just to say, World Economic Forum is not the only association who have been pulling this point. Here is actually another one from the World Economic Forum speaking about digital wildfires. This is to the same extent, and the same goes for the World Health Organization. Have been stressing this dramatically, especially during the current corona pandemic. I mean, the surge in misinformation during this pandemic has been preposterous. And the problem is that they tend to gain a lot of traction, especially because it tends to be information that is very spectacular. And spectacular information grabs our attention. And spectacular information grabbing our attention is basically one way into our consciousness. And it's not for fun that we have seen this new word being coined recently, the infodemic. This word came out from the World Health Organization when they realized that the amount of misinformation pertaining to the current coronavirus, everything from where it came from to how to actually cure it, reached a pattern, which is basically the same pandemic pattern as you would see the actual virus developing by. Actually, even further or faster. Nature had a video about it, how fake news about coronavirus became a second pandemic. And it's certainly true. And it's also certainly true from a structural point of view that we are actually gaining the amount of information that we actually see pertaining to misinformation spreads faster and more elaborate than the truthful information. And one more thing. A recent paper from Science in 2018 went to show that it's not necessarily, we always saying that the bots are a problem. But what actually this particular study showed is when it comes to misinformation, it's not bots sharing misinformation, it's humans. And why? Because we might have a reason for it. We might have a particular motive for spreading our fake news and our misinformation. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that there is an attraction towards misinformation, either for political reasons, propaganda reasons, pecuniary reasons, that means money, trolling, you take your favorite pick. Motives could be many, but there's nothing to the current research that tends to show that the truthful information has in itself a way to go as such. And so let's just look at what we got so far. I went to take a look at what sort of conspiracy theories are right now actually gaining a lot of traction. Look at these, look at the difference between this slide and that slide. There's a lot of text on this. Look at this one. That's all you need, right? There's basically no text on it. there's a picture of a weapon, a picture of a syringe, a picture of money, a picture of the 5G network, and a police. Will tell you 1,000 words and it grabs your attention immediately. And once you're in it, you can start looking at the particular reasons, conspiracy theories as to why. And then one thing you want to worry about is, where does all this information come from? Well, on the right-hand side, down in the corner, it says the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. That's the source. Okay? Question, is that reliable? Well, there you have it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is getting to the truth of the matter is extremely hard in a market where attention grabbing is everything and time is not around. And that only tells you one thing. You have to cram in as much information as possible, using as little text as possible, making it reliable as possible, while people can get an overview immediately. And that's where graphics come into the picture. That's exactly how we can actually cram in a lot of information in very little text. And people can get the idea immediately. And since everybody is in the attention economics market, whether we are the UN, the OECD, troll partners, take your favorite pick, you have to be able to be really good at packing truthful information in a way that's interesting to the public, truthful to the facts, and at the same time will actually be used as a product in an attention economy. So a few examples here to the end. Now look at this. Who's responsible for the spreading of misinformation? Very little text. Well, there are two graphs here, one on the left and one on the right. But look at it. Who's responsible for spreading disinformation pertaining to the Americans? Well, look, fake social media accounts, 55% politicians, 45% Trump, Russia, political government. I can get an overview of this within seconds. And I can also see the celebrities actually, apparently, according to Americans, spreading misinformation. Where fake news is seen as a problem in the EU, there you have the different flags, you have the numbers. In very strong contrast graphics, I can get this information immediately. And we're going to have to see more and more of that. So data designers who are interested, so designers interested in proliferating truthful information is going to be able to work on these particular kind of templates much more now, given the attention economy and the scarcity of attention in the future to come. Another example here, the most common coronavirus conspiracies, well, miracle cures, New World Order, Democratic Party hoax, you can see the point. The same goes on the right-hand side. You have to be able to cram in these stats in a very easy way for everybody to see. And as soon as the discrepancies become extremely big between, say, miracle cures and New World Order, you sort of get the message immediately. Now, one thing is for people to acquire information. But one thing about acquiring information is you can still be doubtful pertaining to it. So it's not only about acquiring, it's also about playing with. It's also about getting it under your skin so you get an idea of where am I? How can I, am I just being fed numbers? Now good. Can I play with the numbers? Well, if you can, that could actually be very helpful for people to understand the nuts and bolts of the problem. So I went to some coronavirus simulators, and they are very nicely done, where you could basically play around with the amount of social activities that you have, and you can see the virus is spreading accordingly, as in this graph here. You can also see the difference between social distancing and not social distancing on the right. And so these simulators are extremely helpful for people to get an idea of exactly the mathematics and the stats behind this without having any idea of the math and the stats per se. And they can still get themselves a pretty good idea. What does it mean? It means that you can actually take ownership of this problem. You can actually get an idea about what it actually is that they're being told in the news, and they can actually simulate it themselves afterwards. Now, you're asking me, what are we going to do to solve this problem? What are we going to do to solve about coronaviruses or misinformation on the web in general? Well, I think there is one UN goal which is highly overlooked, but which to me is probably one of the most visionary goals of all. And it's the 17th goal. It's new partnerships for realizing the goals. Because if we're looking just as misinformation on the web pertaining to the coronavirus is not just a medical problem. It's a political problem. It's an economic problem. It's a social problem. It's now also a psychological problem for the different populations around the world. So clearly, we're going to have new partnerships between NGOs, private companies, and states, possibly overstate organs like the UN to actually treat and tackle these problems. So we're going to have to look to new ownerships in innovative ways, just like Facebook hooked up with WHO pertaining to misinformation on the coronavirus. We're going to have to see a lot more of these partnerships being forged in order for us to come to grips with these problems, because these are problems with so many moving parts. And if we don't have partnerships to follow these moving parts, we are not going to be able to get out on the other side of this misinformation problem, whether it pertains to the coronavirus, elections, misinformation on the web, health issues, inequality, take your favorite pick. So in order to realize the 16 other goals, the 17th goal, to me, is one of the most central goals, but it's also one of the most overlooked goals so far. Maybe Stefan could correct me on this, but it seems to me that is actually one of the really, really strong missions of the UN. And with that, I have been speaking for exactly 15 minutes, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Vincent. Just a first question, as we have a lot of designers watching now currently. Do you have a final message to designers?
Yes, I do
out there?
Yes, I do have a final message to designers.
Yes.
Namely, whatever truthful information that you have to be able to cram down, you have to worry about it being able to put it out in a meme almost, because attention is everything. And so you have to, on one hand, be very truthful to the information and think very strongly about your graphic expression in such a way that it actually has a place as a truthful information product in an attention economy where there's a lot of faulty products, or if you wish, subprime products.
Thank you.
Many thanks, Vincent, for this input. It was fantastic. And I think you made the day of Stefan because you mentioned goal 17. There are two targets in the goal 17. This two last from the 169 targets, they cover exactly statistics, that you have to build up more data and statistics, and they have to be comparable. Yeah, let's go to the next speaker. It's Stefan Schweinfest, and he's the director of the UN Statistics Division. So you can say he's the highest statistician on the planet. So if you have any question to data and statistics, Stefan has an answer for everything. I'm pretty sure it's like that. So normally we would be all together in 1 or 2 weeks in New York for the UN Statistical Commission. But let's take it positive. We are together now virtually, and we have Stefan with us on board. And Stefan has the task from the UN General Assembly to build up a monitoring system for the 17 SDG goals. And it's fantastic to have you on board, Stefan, to give some insight what the UN is doing with different data sets you have, and how do you visualize that. So Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, to the organizer, and thank you to Vincent already, to a very inspiring, getting us off to a good start. I learned a new word. I'm always happy when I do that. Attention economy, that's great. And I also agree with you that goal 17 is overlooked and critically important as an enabler. So when Diane and Benjamin invited me, I said, you definitely have the wrong speaker here, because I'm definitely from the last century, and I will lift the average age of the panel and probably everybody connected by about 100 years. But they still insisted that I should be there. And I must say, when I heard the overall title, I was personally touched, because it's about data and design. And my life has all been about data. I'm a trained economist and mathematician, and became a statistician at the United Nations 32 years ago. And but my father was a marketing director, and he was a designer, and he was drawing at home, and he was always giving us the message that it's not only the product and the quality of the product, product that is important, but also the quality of the communication with the users and the clients. So that is something that I learned very early on. So let me talk a little bit about what we are doing with data at the United Nations, and it's going to be a quick panoramic flight. Of course, this is about visualization. So we put a quote of what I was told is the pop star of data visualization, Mr. Nathan Yao. And I think I'm not going to read you my slides. Most of the people in this show are adults, so I can think they can read. The most important line is the last line, achieve their goals. I mean, everything we do, compiling data, disseminating data, communicating data, visualizing data, is to help somebody achieve their goals. Next slide. The vision that we have is also the most important word on this slide is the word used, to make more and better data open, accessible, and used. I always say we are producing data as a statistical office, but a good data item is only an item that is actually used. And let me just reflect for a second on how the use of official statistics, which is what we are dealing with, government data on the economy, on social conditions, the environment, etc., they have been traditionally used by public policy decision makers. But I mean, that has changed. I think data, and especially international data that we have, including, like, for instance, trade data across the world, they are also used by the private sector, and the social data are also used by citizens in a spirit of accountability. And that is what Benjamin mentioned when we at the United Nations adopted the frame of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It was clear that we would need an indicator framework to follow what is actually happening in all of the countries around the world. And that is my central job, to get the data on the 169 targets and the 230 40 indicators that we defined from the 193 countries, so that we get a good idea who is having difficulties with this ambitious agenda and why, and how can we help. Next slide. We started with a discussion on data revolution a couple of years ago, and now we are talking about data for sustainable development, and I just described it. Data in a statistical office at the very beginning are primarily numbers. We're talking about numerical data, and I will modify that in a little bit, in a little while, because now there are different types of data also. But what we are really trying to achieve, and this is the highlighted word at the end of this slide, is insights, because we do not, data are a tool, they are communicating something, and they are communicating insights and understanding of the world around us. So this is critically important. So that's why, next slide, we do not want to only have data numbers sitting next to each other, so that people can understand them and discover them and have access to them. We need to give people data also that they can explore them, that they can share them and use them and draw their own conclusions. So this has perhaps been changing in the philosophy of a data producer. The statistical offices who were traditionally just data producers, and they have put the data out there, and that was called data dissemination. And I noticed, very interestingly, in Serenella's title, the next speaker, it says Director of Data Dissemination and Communication. And that reflects a bit the mindset in the statistician's head over the last 10, 20 years, that it's not only for us to put data out there in a one-way channel, it is all about data communication. And that's why these platforms have become very important, because the platforms are a place for producers and users to meet and actually have a dialogue of on data. Now, we haven't talked, next slide, about visualization. Why is visualization important? It's not only putting numbers out there in the traditional table format, and I will show you in a minute how that looked for many, many years before and how it has changed, so that you get a visual of what has happened in the statistical office over the last couple of years. But visualization is also important so that the user can find patterns in the data, can understand changes over time, can identify subgroups in a population, and, for instance, look at the geographical dimension, and even start to understand causation. But I mean, have not only the data as raw material, but also start to understand a little bit about the data relationships. So how has this changed? Let's now take a very quick look back. This is our statistical yearbook from 1948, our first issue, rest after the foundation of the United Nations. And how did we present data? Infant mortality rates from 1932 to 1947. This is what I was working with for many, many years. Now you may be thinking this is my start with the bad first, and then I'm moving to the good later. But this would be a little bit too simple in life. Even here, you have visualization, you have aids in the presentation that draw your attention to certain elements. There are lines that are bold, totals that are bold. There are lines that make it clear where are the big numbers on this table. So even in this very old-fashioned, rudimentary way of producing and presenting data, there are initial elements of visualization aids that help the user to understand what they are really looking at. Okay, this is the past. How does the world look now? Next slide. Here is what we are looking at now. This is the same type of information, mortality data. On the left-hand side, you see, and here are the two big dimensions that I'm dealing with, time and space. Time is, of course, we are dealing about, describing development. So we always want to know how something developed over time. And this is, of course, the classical time graph to help us follow an indicator. And then the geospatial information has become increasingly important. Actually, it's now part of my program. It's not only statistics, but also geospatial information. And here you have, for instance, you can see at incidence of mortality and how it is different in different countries. And so much more appealing information than just a simple table as we looked at before. Now, I have to, looking at this, next slide, I have to make an important remark about data quality. It's always about data quality, and I couldn't agree more with Vincent. I am not for data visualization for the lazy ones, the ones that do not want to read the footnotes or the technical notes or the details. Data visualization is sometimes a helpful simplification of the very complex reality that is behind a set of numbers. But with great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man principle. Data visualization has to be done in a very responsible way. The first line of responsibility is the underlying data, and the source has to be good before you start visualization. And then the way you visualize, you start at some very elaborate level to manipulate people, drawing their attention to certain parts of the data. And that has to be done in a very responsible way. And here we are talking about data ethics. And I cannot emphasize this point enough. Now, next slide. Why do we want to visualize data? Well, we don't want to just throw the naked raw material at you. Data tells the story of somebody or some place or some group of people or an economy or a piece of our planet, the environment. And we want to ultimately tell that story, and data are a vehicle. So that's why data visualization is very important to help us to complete the storytelling. And that is why, next slide, when we have data publications today, as opposed to 1948, they look like this. This is our Sustainable Development Goal report in 2020, which gives all of the information for all the countries in the world on where they stand with the development goals. And you see on the right-hand side, we are using all kinds of data visualization tools, bar graphs, infographics, charts, maps. So the world has become a lot more colorful and a lot more interesting, also in the way we are conveying that information. And this is a print publication. Now I'll give you my final 4 slides. Let me check how I'm doing on the time. Almost okay. On my final 4 slides, I have. I invite you to visit our data website, unstats.un.org. It's very simple. Where you find the following tools. This is what we call our SDG country profile, where you find the information on the indicators for all of the countries of the world. Here we have specific indicators for Colombia here. There are statistical and geospatial tools there. And the exciting thing is that you cannot only look at the numbers, because primarily, of course, we deliver the raw materials, the numbers, the databases, the underlying databases. But on these websites, you can play around with it. You can create your own graphs. We have done this also in cooperation with the private sector. Esri has helped us a lot with the mapping of the information, and we have the so-called Open SDG Data Hub, which is our global SDG database with some national data in the design format. And then you get these kind of things that you can play around with on our website. We also extended this next slide. Now that we had tons of COVID information, we have a special UN COVID data hub where you find information, COVID data, health care, resources, economy, population related, all the data that are relevant for looking at COVID. And last slide for me is our most proud product was a recent publication, which is called The World's Women 2020. And this is perhaps our most accomplished publication because it's not even in print. This is a publication that we do every 5 years, and we started in 1970 or 75, I'm now not sure. So we have done that many, many times, but you can see how this has evolved because the last publication from 2020 is no longer in print. It is only in digital format on our website. You can browse through it. You can play around with the data. You can create your own graphs, and you have highlighted stories. So this is a whole package deal, far away from the traditional square tables that statisticians used to produce, going a long way from where we are as the owner and producers of information to where we want the data to go, to the users, to produce understanding, insight, deeper knowledge, capability of taking decisions, informed decisions, and holding those people who have power accountable. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. Just a short question. I got stuck when you said the UN is not producing data visualizations for the lazy ones. I love that. And there was the slide where you had the time comparison with the location comparison, the first one. And then you showed afterwards, there were some slides which were more like infographics with really just numbers, percentages, and stages. Isn't that one for the lazy ones?
Yes, it is.
That one is okay.
No, it is. I mean, and I'm always struggling with that compromise. I mean, Vincent talked about the attention economy. Yes, we also want attention because we feel we are managing data and information very responsible. So we want to draw people to our databases. But I would hope that by these infographics are entry tools for people to actually go to the product that we really produce, which is the underlying complex database, and try to go in there and look at the data and create your own visualization tools. That has to be the objective at the end. I hope people don't get stuck at the entry door.
Understood. Thanks.
May I just add one thing pertaining to this? I think Stefan is hitting a very important point, because if people can't take ownership of the data and the problems, they're not going to care about it. So the entire idea about people actually being able to play around with the data and saying, hypothetically, suppose we do such and so, then what would be the consequence of this and that? And that particular thing is extremely important for people to take ownership of the problem. First of all, the data, and second, all of the problems. 2 cents, my 2 cents.
Thanks, Vincent. Do you want to give Stefan on that, or you want to go in the last round? That's fine, good. So let's go to the last speaker. I'm very happy to have Statistics Italy with us on board, because Switzerland is working very closely with Italy on different projects. We meeting often, and I think it's fantastic to see how the National Statistical Office has changed since we have the adoption of the 23 agenda. There was, as Stefan described, I mean, it was the same was happening on the global or the UN level, the same happened on the national level. I mean, it's much more modernized communication. And as Stefan said, I mean, Serenella is also responsible for communication. I think that's the way to go. And at the UN meetings, we are talking often about storytelling. I think we're doing that since 10 years, but I think I see some progress now in the last few years. So I think it's great to see how a national statistical office is producing and communication data today. There's a much stronger link now to census data. I mean, census data are very old ones, and it's great to see this transformation. And I just give the floor to you, Serenella, and to see how Italy is working with data today.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening, and let me start with my presentation. Of course, I want to draw oh, I'm sorry. I think I have the same problem of my colleague.
It looks good. It looks good.
Yeah, it looks good. Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Yes, yes.
So my speech will focus in general on the importance of data visualization. I agree with Stefan when he says that infographics are for lazy people, but I shouldn't say not only for, and I agree when he said that seeing is believing, and for communication, for every type of communication, seeing is believing in data. So before focus on the topic and on the PP census, permanent population census, I would like to draw your attention to 3 points, which from my point of view are perfectly suited to this situation. First point is about the use of the net. The web changed the way by which people interact and research information. We can't avoid to mention this because the web really produces a disaggregation, a global disintermediation, which with consequence on rules of communication, on relationship, on roles. Second point, time. Time today is really an increasing likely resource. So to communicate every context, especially in data telling, you have to be fast, you have to be competitive, and you have to use, of course, the same language of the net. Third point is just visual language. Sight is the, how can I say, is the most important sense out of 5, and about 9% of the inputs that come to us derive from the eyes, and have a processing speed of less than 1/10 of a second. That's why I agree with Stefan when he say infographics are important for lazy people, but I say it's important for modern times, because as I said, time is an increasing lacking of resource. But why I use this point? Because communication, how can I say, communication, the institutional one, the political one, communication on data is absolutely conditioned by these three elements, and we have to use the same language of internauts, the same language of the people of the net. That's why in our institute, in our ISTAT, we change the way to communicate. Thank you, Benjamin. As you said at the beginning, we moved from a traditional strategy of communication toward a new communication dedicated to users. That's another key word that I want to use in my speech, and that I recognize even in the world, in the words of Stefan. We have to be seductive, we have to be competitive, we have to occupy as sentinel a digital world, a digital space, and we have, how can I say, we have to be aware, because we have to do the same language, we have to reach the same aims, not of propaganda, but we need to be equally convincing. That's why infographics, dashboard, cards, images, photos, images are our best allies. And here you can see a lot of our infographics. I noticed that even Vincent spoke about a war, and I think that communicators are, especially today, such like soldiers who were, in case of ISTAT, to enter in a counter narrative with puts, I think, I believe in this, real data. So web communication tools are very, very important to a good communication, to do data telling, not only storytelling. What I mean by web communication tools, everything, absolutely everything. So infographics, videos, pills, card, as well as photos, games, talent contest offline and online, TV, spot, everything. Here you can see some example of our infographics. We chose a gallery, but I want to give you some elements about our history. You have always to remind that Istituto Nazionale di Statistica, ISTAT, is public. And I'm proud to say that considering the public administration in Italy, ISTAT really believes in communication and in modern communication, and found alternative ways to read the reality with particular attention to the users. We have done a lot, especially since 2014. 2014 was the starting point for our data visualization, our infographics. In fact, we realized the first infographic. It was Italy in a European context, simple, effective, and it was used and dedicated to special stakeholders. It was dedicated and used by journalists who were at that time our main stakeholder. But we moved and we arrived at 2018, and ISTAT experience grows. This was the first infographic in English. Nowadays, we produce more than 500 infographics per year, 52 are in English, and this was for us a turning point, as it was used by newspaper and by TV. So we understood, not me, because I've been working in ISTAT since 20, but people who went before me understood a simple things that we had to be. We had to change, and we had to move and change the strategy of communication, particularly dedicating to users. We moved from an occasional production of infographics connected to production, connected to some particular needs, and we plan a regular production to infographic to help stakeholders, and our stakeholders began to grow. And nowadays we speak and we are referred not only to journalists, but to common ordinary people, to public organization, to children, in order to enlarge the platea. I want to use this word, the platea of target, as we really believe in the mission of statistics. We really believe that statistics is a science. Of course, it's a science, but we think that statistics is a science serving the other ones. So if you want to be serving as well as the communication and dissemination, and I thank you, Stefan, even for the quotation about the need to put together communication and dissemination, that indeed are two sides of the same service. Well, as I was already saying, if statistics is serving the other science, communication is serving really users. I want to draw your attention to this infographics. I like it very much. It was not released on my directorate, but it was released in 2019. But it was very popular. You know, look at the expression of the old woman. It's absolutely easy to read, to understand. It's immediate, and that is the real aim of data visualization in our way. As I said, with that image today, it's not possible to communicate. We can forget to be effective. If Vincent quoted the case of pandemic, and even though I would like not to speak again about pandemic, I must show you this data visualization as infographics, as at the same time we were pondering a new strategic about infographics, we began to use even data visualization and graphic tools, and as well as infographics. They revealed, especially on pandemic crisis, absolutely useful to clear up, to solve doubts, to make a counter narrative against fake news and against mystification about the data. On the left side, you have a data visualization realized by one of our colleagues, and I'm proud to say the 500,000 of access. We reached 500,000 of access in a short while. On the right side, you have another important dashboard who was asked by one of the most eminent broadcasters in our television in Italy to support to support, again, to clarify doubts against the spread of virus in Italy. And the infographics below with hashtags that we really used during the first lockdown, Istat per il Paese, that means it's easy, Istat for the country, is the way we had made our role in clarifying doubts. And again, statistic is a saying serving other statistic. How can I say, if we have to show you our best case, our best practice, or our infographic, of course, we can't avoid to mention the use of data visualization, the use of tools, and the use, of course, of infographics, even speaking about SDGs. You perfectly know these infographics, considering how it's difficult to explain people about SDGs because it's articulated, and considering that ISTAT is very committed to play an active role of national coordination in the production of indicators for measuring sustainable development, we really found these infographics our best ally, not only ally, a friend to explain, but not only infographics. Of course, even in case of SDGs, we use different ways. So we use videos, we use card, we use interview, we use all tools we have been using since 2016 to be clear. Is that experience about census? We say, or we are proud to say that census for us, it's a topic. Everybody knows what is census important for, but since 2016, so you can see that everything about communication strategy changed in that year. We were obliged to change a style of innovation because we introduce another way to realize census. We move from a traditional census to a permanent census one. What does it mean? It means, again, here you have a lot of infographics, colored, and colored is one of our main helpful elements in drawing infographic. Red, because red was the color of the campaign, but because red is the color you can read more, especially during, especially using social networks. Here you have other example of infographics. I say that these infographics really introduce an innovation in the way of telling the way of telling census, but not only census, because the same style we use to tell census were copied to tell other campaign. And thanks to this campaign that is the most innovative in public administration, we really reach a large amount of users, and we really reach our aims. We didn't speak only to policymakers who use census data to take decision, both at central and local level, but we really reach simple organization, non-profit world, of course, journalists, blogger, children, school, and so we think we were part of a changement, of a mood, of a sentiment. Currently, is on the way. The last census of agriculture, and we are trying to follow the example of census permanent in the way of communicating the communicated census. You can imagine the problem we have had in asking people to follow or to asking people to answer the phone during pandemic, asking at the phone or open the door during the pandemic when we were locked down. So using all the means to speak to the people, to underline the importance of census, because census give us information to be.
Serenella?
Yes?
Sorry, you have, I don't want to interrupt, but you have like 1 minute.
Okay, I'm sorry. No. Probably you notice that I'm very proud for this experience in ISTAT.
Yes, definitely.
Also, if I okay, I want to leave you with this, if I can. Okay.
Yes, please.
Let me say, because it's easy, it's light, it's impressive, and I think you will find everything I said. Bye. We don't want to leave behind anyone. Bye, everybody, and sorry to be late.
Don't worry. Thank you. Perfect. So now we got, thanks for all the speeches. Was really interesting. Now we have actually time and space for the questions. For everyone, you still are free to ask questions over the link in YouTube of a Slido. We also had the question if this is being recorded and available afterwards. Yes, it is in YouTube, so you will find all the talks also afterwards. And now actually I would, if you all are okay with that, I would already ask one question, which is touch pointing actually all the three talks. We have one very interesting question coming from Sarah from Norwich. She's asking, is there any room for emotion in such a fact-based field? So kind of how do you deal with these emotions? We saw it a lot now in Serenella's slides. So how is the approach towards emotionalizing facts?
May I come with a
comment? Just go.
Okay, so one, I don't know if you know this book, but Jonah Berger, who is a marketing professor from Pennsylvania, wrote a very interesting book called Contagious. And what he shows there is there are certain emotions that are worth tapping into if you want something to go viral. Namely, I'm sorry to say, anger is very contagious. Is one. If you're angry, anger is one. and we have a lot of negative activity mobilizing sentiments, like indignation is another one. And so to say, so those tend to get a lot of traction. However, there are also positive activity mobilizing sentiment that tends to get a lot of social transmission. And one of them, but the most natural one, the most we know of, the best, is actually, it's not for fun that Barack Obama calls his campaign hope. Hope is the most mobilizing activity mobilizing sentiment that we know. So if you can instill hope, that tends to get a lot of traction. Of course, it's easy to instill anger, and anger is also a very activity mobilizing sentiment. But if you're looking at the positive ones, if there are ways in which you can make an information product that is truthful to the facts, but is also activity mobilizing in terms of hope, then chances are you're going to have a space in the attention economy.
You definitely need an awareness, right? So kind of that emotion you are creating.
Yeah, and the activity mobilizing sentiment. If you write out, "I'm so happy today," nobody's gonna share that. It's a state that you're in. It doesn't animate anybody else to do anything. However, if you write out, "There is hope pertaining to getting out of the coronavirus. Here are some numbers that will show you accordingly," that might just tend to get some traction. Just as an example.
Yeah. I think that the interesting question behind that is we saw that Serenella was showing the elderly lady, right? Which had some emotions, and it was a photograph where I don't know how far, in what direction that emotion is going. If you see that, is she sick? Is she happy? Is she elderly? So what kind of bridge or what kind of entry point to that statistic does it create, right?
Oh, I see.
May I?
Yeah. Of course.
I don't think it's the most important thing is which kind of reaction is to move a reaction. As we said at the beginning of the speech, you can imagine how we have to fight to draw the attention to data. And the pandemic was absolutely a phenomenon. Everybody, I think, in Italy, in the world, speak about data without knowing anything. We had to defend ourselves. Every people went to istat.it, look at the number without considering source, without considering the time, and they wrote something about pandemic. So that's why occupying the digital webs is absolutely important. As far as I know, I realized that the most important thing is being, after all, trying to counter narrative, trying to not control, because control is a killer word, but is trying to manage, try to offer another version, possibly from my point of view, correct one, independence, and able to clarify doubts. The elder lady, thanks to the elder lady, a lot of people saw that infographics. And the minutes after, the 10 seconds after, they saw the text. They read the numbers. And the numbers on an infographics are immediate because there is the emotion, you know what I mean? So the first thing is having a reaction. After, our duty is work on.
Stefan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, you are asking a German statistician to talk about emotions. I mean, that's great. So, no, but I mean, I would like to answer on two levels. First of all, we all act based on realities, on facts, but also on perceptions. Perceptions are equally important to determine the behavior of people. So we are increasingly even recognizing that we need to measure that too. So there are, I mean, apart from the cold facts that we are trying to measure, we are trying to measure emotions because there are sentiment surveys. And it's quite interesting because, I mean, it's even economically relevant. I mean, when will people invest? When they feel comfortable about the future? That may not only be when the economic figures are good, but when they really have a certain general comfort level about where the world is going. So, I mean, sentiment surveys are becoming increasingly important. Also, we are not only measuring the world around us. I mean, we are having increasingly a program of well-being, a concept of well-being where we understand we are not only measuring economics and social and environmental facts, but how do they all interplay to produce the ultimate objective, namely sort of well-being. And then I think when you have numbers, when I bring numbers to the people, I would like to have two reactions. On the one hand, I want to have a cognitive reaction that the people look at the number and say, that increases my understanding about a certain phenomenon in the world. But I don't only want to, I want people also to change their behavior, for instance. I mean, to react, to behave more responsibly, for instance, with the vis-a-vis the environment or without social vulnerable groups. And we often say if something is not measured and described in numbers, it is not seen. And so I think when we communicate the numbers, we do not only aim at a cognitive process, we also aim at an emotional response, namely that people start reflecting on their own behavior. And this is something we are trying to affect in a positive way in the future, of course.
Thank you.
A lot of great questions out there. I would just want to, I mean, there was one directly addressed to Vincent, but I think I want just to give it first to you, Stefan. The question is just, Vincent, are you advocating for using evil attention-grabbing tactics for good? Should we copy the tactics of disinformation spreaders? So Stefan, as a UN person, how do you deal with that? I mean, you have to follow some rules. I mean, there are UN fundamental principles, but anyway, I mean, how do you deal in a world with a lot of misinformation? How do you change the communication just to follow the rules of the UN, of course, but just to be attractive, to be heard? How do you do that?
That's the fundamental question. Always, does the end justify the means? I think we have to be very, very careful with that. But we have to be very careful that we are not left behind. We are always talking of leaving no one behind. And I once got a good laugh out of an opening line and said that includes statisticians. We don't want to be left behind either, because I think we are doing good work. And that means we are just doing a lousy PR job, a selling of what we are producing, namely understanding and a better perception and knowledge of the universe. So yes, we should use some of the attention-grabbing methodologies, but we have to always be very, very careful that we don't get seduced by those means. I mean, these are only means. We need to be very, very clear all the time what the end is.
Vincent, you do not have to follow any rules on statistics, but what's your answer on that? What should Stefan and Serenella do?
No, I might not have to follow rules of statistics, but I have to follow rules of science. And that doesn't allow me either to go beyond the boundaries that Stefan was talking about. Let me add one more thing. Look at here. We are all now in the business of creating information products, just like we were in the business of creating financial products up until everything cracked in 2008. And some projects are prime, and some products are subprime. Now, in Stefan's case, and in scientific case, and in all our cases here, we have to be truthful to the numbers. There's just no other way. But it does not exclude the possibility of also actually playing the attention economics game in the same way as a responsible editor from Die Zeit or from The Guardian or any other news outlet are able to actually, on one hand, balance content and truthfulness against the possibility of using the tricks and of the trade in attention economy. So no, I'm by no means advocating using the dirty tricks, because Stefan has to answer back to the UN, and Serenella has to work back to her agency, and I have to answer back to my university. And so from that perspective, that does not exclude that we cannot use some of the tips of the trade, but we have to pick our fights with care. We can't take every single one of them on. And so if Stefan has a very important statistical number for supporting any of the goals, you can certainly think about the way in which you just want to disseminate this to the public and communicate it, and the same for Serenella. But it does not mean that you can use the dirty tricks. But look, there are examples of very, very viral videos, say online, that are totally truthful to the point of the point and has a very important message to carry. And that is an editorial decision that we have to carry as being the actors in the business of the attention economy, truthfully.
Serenella? Yeah.
I would say that that public communicators have to be ethic in such a way. So, for instance, I want to explain about my experience. When you organize an important communication campaign as Census, we manage not only with statistics, not only with numbers, but we have a contamination, a continuous contamination with people who know communication, with people who know sociology, with people, psychologists, because it's very delicate to use the number. Number itself is neutral, but using numbers for data telling or for storytelling is absolutely dangerous. In my mission, the keywords are accuracy, and Stefan said, is independence, and is serving. And I use these two or three keywords to lead my action. And I think only by this way we can manage something useful, not only for decision makers, not only for journalists, but even for citizens. I think nowadays the most important is being aware.
Thank you. Benjamin, do you have, I'm just looking at the time, we would have, let's say, ±4 minutes. Benjamin, do you have one question which is sticking out there? I mean, very interesting questions. The question is, which one do we ask? Let's say 2 more questions.
I agree with you. I mean, a lot of great questions, but maybe we can go a bit more technical in that direction, because there are a lot of designers, I guess, looking. So it's an interesting question. I mean, for example, what are the limits of creativity in data visualization? As we slowly break away from traditional bar, line, pie graphs, do we think this change is effective? And there was one question, how do you measure if visualization is good? I mean, if the people look at it. I think it was seeing is believing, I think was written somewhere. So Serenella, how does it change? I mean, you're the most professional person on this panel. What changed?
It becomes a strategy, just to move from an occasional production to a regular production means that when you have a report, when you have a statistic today, you prepare a long job. We prepare, for instance, a copy for social, and we made different copies for social network, because I can't use the same language for Instagram, for Twitter, for Facebook. So it's really a great job. That's why I think that, especially today, on data telling, you cannot have a simple communication, but you have to do communication always beside the science, always beside the professor. Today, we don't have any decision before speaking with our top management, because looking at the possible reaction of that infographics, you know what I mean. That's why, even if we are proud of more than 100 infographics per year we produce, we could produce much more if we had time, if we were more. But sometimes, realizing an infographics or making a dashboard is really a products management. It's really a complete, job. You have to be, you have to be, you have to put the user safe. You don't have to make the same mistakes that the other do when they use Twitter for propaganda. That's why I say that communicating data, if you are a public institution, it's absolutely an ethic job. You can't,
Thanks for that. I just want to give just the floor to Stefan, just for 1 minute, just a bit, because the time is running as I see. Just Stefan, your input on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the question was, where are the limits to the data visualization? And in a way, this comes from the design community, and they want to hear, of course, there are no limits, or please don't impose too many limits on our creativity. And I don't want to. I think there's a lot more we can do. I have an image in my mind, for instance. Data visualization is not only bar graphs and something like that. The other day I saw somewhere a 3-dimensional representation of a city, so that the people actually could understand what is underneath the ground, where are plumbings, where is transportation, subways, and all of these. So I mean, it was fascinating to look at a 3-dimensional representation. These are data. These are very highly complex geospatial data. And but the underlying responsibility and ethics that Serenella is talking about is the truthfulness towards what you represent. Data are always a reduction of a very complex reality, the reality that is around us, and we are trying to project that into some numbers or some images, some pictures, some maps, or something like that. The limits, the boundaries, the truthfulness towards the complex reality that is behind it. As long as the data adequately and truthfully reflect the reality behind, they are helpful. If the visualization, of course, distorts the underlying reality in any kind of way, then we have a problem and we have to talk about it.
It's true.
Thanks.
That's the challenge.
Yeah. Okay, any last sentence? I would say, is there something you would like to encourage the designers somehow, because there is a lot of also hurdles for designers to get into statistics and the sustainable development goals? How can they be the goal number 17, partnerships? So how can the designers partner up and come to you and create meaningful and good new products?
Okay, so in terms pertaining to the UN, I think Stefan would be the go-to person there. But let me tell you one thing just on the end, and I'm also a professor of philosophy, okay? So let me just end on a philosophical note. There's only one thing. There's only one thing that keeps society together. It's called trust. It's even the precondition for bilateral trade, and I think that Stefan would agree to me on that. You can't even define bilateral trade without an element of trust. And so we have to make sure that the kind of information that's being proliferated through the social media and elsewhere is something that you can trust. It is something that we have to instill. And so I think that is a major goal in every design now, that what we have to make sure the cement of society is trust. I just sent you a little video clippage from one of the Danish news networks that did a video on trust, which is a brilliant piece. And it's about, it's basically, it's based on that a business principle of, when you go in a little bit and you hear one thing and you go out again, it had a certain term. And they did that for various people in Denmark. And that is a brilliant little flip, about 3 minutes, to show it's all about trust. So what we need is basically for people to make quality of high definition is to trust the source and trust their own judgment to make qualified decisions. So it's all about trust, and we need more of it, whether it comes from stats or numbers or emotions or both.
Okay, cool. We will add the video link in YouTube. Thanks.
I'm sorry, but I have to go.
Good. So, Stefan, Serenella, last sentence, and then we're done.
No, I think designers are wonderfully creative people, and a priori it looks like an odd match, statisticians and designers, but I like the title of your series, Data and Design. I think there are wonderful complementarities, and I mean, let's just start communicating. We may be a priori speaking very different languages, but I always say there's a real danger when people start talking to each other, that they start understanding each other and respecting each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's certainly something I would be looking forward to.
Super, thank you.
I completely agree with Stefan. Seeing is believing. Viva designer, but I agree with Stefan. Absolutely.
Perfect. We are going. Thank you very much for everyone who has been joining. We are going now offline from the live stream. I'm closing the live stream. Thanks for everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you for having this event.
Good. We're done. Okay, we're not online anymore.